The Olympics and the Paralympics are next year. Yes, you heard me right, next year. So in the world of high-performance sport, qualification is in progress, decisions are being made, details finalised, and medal moments being plotted. I'm Michael.
And I'm John. This is Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy, and for the 11 athletes on the world-class programme at one of the nation's Paralympic sports, there were very good results at the recent World Championships in Brazil, and the aim of continuing a proud run of medals dating back to Sydney 2000. And all with a new man in charge.
Yeah, thank you guys. So I'm Greg Baker. I'm the Performance Director of Boccia UK. Relatively new into the role, so started the role in August of 2022. And ultimately my job is to provide strategic leadership to the world-class programme and trying to get the athletes to achieve medal success at major championships. That includes European, World and ultimately Paralympic Games.
Let's just reflect on the end of 2022 and a trip to the Southern Hemisphere for you guys. World Championships in Brazil in Rio. How do you look back on it?
Yeah, it's relatively, very fresh for us. So literally only been a few weeks since we got back. We were straight into a Christmas break. So that was quite nice for all the staff and athletes involved because it was a very tiring, if you like, preparation phase towards Brazil. A lot of competitions, a lot of training camps, and then Brazil itself as a major championship always is. It's very emotions running, medal matches, people winning, losing, all sorts going on. So it can be quite emotional. So it's good to get a break over the Christmas period. But a very good, in summary, World Championships for us. It's definitely put us, I would like to say, on the map for international boccia. We've been on the map before, but we've really made a statement at the World Championships, being, winning 3 medals. First time Boccia UK have got to 3 World Championship finals. Of those 3 medals, we had a gold medalist, and that gold medalist is a new gold medalist, a female, Claire Taggart, a new gold medalist there, and then 2 silver medals. So we were very close actually to winning 3 gold medals, which would have put us at the top of the list of all the countries there, top of the podium, if you like, in terms of the medal tally. So we come away from there very pleased. And in addition to the 3 medals, we had other athletes beating athletes inside the top 10, getting out of the group pools into the quarterfinals, last 16. So we know what we now need to do to build on that and build on that platform for Paris. But coming back away from it, very happy. But of course, when you do well, you've got to back it up. So that's the challenge now going into the next 18 months.
So how does the World Championship programme, in terms of the different disciplines and categories, compare then to the Paralympics? Are we saying there's 3 medals in the World Championship, so if the Paralympics were tomorrow, there'd be 3 Paralympic medals?
Well, we definitely have a chance in those 3 events that we medalled in. We are very much up there and can, as it is, we have a lot of technical skill development sports. We will have a chance, but of course, you could easily lose last 16 quarterfinals. So we're going to have to be very on the money now to make sure that we are doing everything more, if you like, than what our competitors are doing and countries around us. So we don't not now just get complacent and just keep doing what we're doing for the next 18 months. We've got to look to slightly change things so we can be even more prepared for Paris. But yeah, we are within a shout within those 3 medals. It's the program for Paris is literally the same as the World Championships. You could argue to say that the World Championships will have more athletes there than the Paralympic Games, because the Paralympic Games qualification process is a lot harder, a lot tougher. So the best countries will be at the Paralympic Games. So in addition to just being something that the whole world gets to see, and it feels different because it's a Paralympic Games, then that's the only difference. So you're absolutely right. Those events that we took 3 medals in, we will be there or thereabouts come Paris.
And boccia, of course, is a purely Paralympic sport.
It is. And for me, that's what makes it really exciting and really unique. We don't have an Olympic counterpart. You could argue to say that the sport is similar to bowls, but indoors and similar to some other sports. But it is on its own in terms of that uniqueness. And I think it's fantastic for athletes who have the severity of the disabilities that are involved in boccia to get involved in boccia, which I think is fantastic. We are the sport that I always like to say, and maybe as other people might disagree, but we're the face of the Paralympics because it is the sport for Paralympic athletes that doesn't have that counterpart, or the able-bodied Olympic counterpart, which has its pros and cons, of course, in terms of getting people involved in the sport. But I think it makes us unique, and we can really build on that. I think World Boccia are doing as good a job as possible to market it and get more people participating in the sport as well. Well, boccia it's really well represented around the world. There's a lot of countries that do it. There's a lot of athletes that do it, and we just need to speak more about that, I think, on the international landscape to get people more understanding of what boccia is, what it can involve, and who can take part in it.
And before we talk about you and your switch from para table tennis to boccia, just finally on the actual sport itself, you mentioned there about Paris. Who are your main competitors? You say it's a wide number of nations taking part. Who are the main ones you're thinking and focusing on? And I'm assuming France, the fact that they're hosting the Paralympics, are also investing quite heavily.
Yeah, France have got a big team, and they are investing, and that they will be there or thereabouts, of course, with the home games. As you know, every country, as you say, in home games increases their sort of competitiveness by 30-40%. So you always have to watch out for home games athletes. In addition to that, some of our, if you like, big competitors, rivals that I've been tracking since I started the role and trying to make connections with as well to make sure we've got some training opportunities with them and so on is Thailand, I think Hong Kong, Brazil. They've got big teams. They're centralized. They're training a lot. They've got a lot of good athletes amongst all of the classifications. So not, one or two athletes that do well. They've got a broad range of depth of athletes that can come through. And also you can see some of the new athletes coming through in those countries at some of the younger pathway competitions as well on the international scene. So there are others, you get some countries that have a pocket of 2 or 3 good athletes and they will always be there. It's like Colombia and BC4 have got some really strong athletes. But in terms of broad, sort of the whole team being good, you're looking at Hong Kong, you're looking at Thailand, you're looking at Korea. There are a lot of Asian nations that are coming through, but there's a real big spread of medals actually within the championships and the World Championships and Paralympic Games. So there's not one dominant force, if you like, dominant country. Like in table tennis, it would always be China. They would come home with the most medals. Then it'd be Korea, and then who's going to get that third spot would be the sort of mentality. Whereas in boccia, although those countries I've mentioned do very well across the international scene, in year by year, when you look at the major championships and you look at the data, there's not one country that are above everybody else. So I see that as a real opportunity for GB. So can we be that nation? We've got some work to do to get there. We've definitely got athletes, as we say, that are now medal potential, as we've seen at the World Championships. And we obviously had David Smith, who remarkably has won, 2 gold medals back to back, World Championships back to back. But we want to increase that depth and breadth. And we know we've got to look at the future coming through. And we've set a target of, the next 10 years, can we be that country that is above everybody else? And we have depth coming through. We've got the right culture as well. And we're winning medals at all major championships and Paralympic Games. So there's an opportunity here, but those countries I mentioned, Asia, are definitely the ones that stand out when you look at all competitions throughout the year.
And for those of us that follow Paralympic sport quite closely and follow it on the radio, watch it, David, as well as having his Paralympic gold medals, also has the best hair in the Paralympics. It was quite some do he had at the last Paralympic Games. John mentioned, of course, that you've switched from para table tennis. Yeah. Tell us a bit about boccia as a game, and did you have to teach yourself the game, or how does that switch from one sport to the other kind of manifest itself?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. To go from one sport to the other. I think we'd be all naive to say that it's absolutely easy and there's nothing to it and you just crack on. The similarity, the reason why I chose boccia actually is also, it's a great opportunity. It's a Paralympic sport. I love being involved in the Paralympic world and really helping the athletes be the best they can be in that space. But also it's a technical skill development sport. So similar to table tennis, where you have to do X amount of volume, X amount of training to get to a certain level. It's repeat. There's a lot of things that can go wrong on the day or right, which way you want to look at it, because if you could be the best prepared you can be, but then if your opponent's better than you, or things happen in the game, there's a lot of strategy involved, a lot of tactical decision making. You've got to be in the moment, absolutely switched on. And it doesn't matter if you've got loads of form going into a competition. Things, you've just got to go in the moment. And that's similar. Table tennis and boccia are quite similar like that. So to go into a sport that has those similarities, in terms of that technical skill development side, was something that I really wanted to do. So I came into the sport, obviously, with all my table tennis background, knowledge, expertise. But of course, boccia is a different sport. There's different rules. There's obviously you're participating against somebody else. You are competing against somebody else, which is similar. But of course, there are different rules that you've got to get used to. And so, you go in and ask a lot of questions and I'll still probably ask questions until the day I leave, because there's always things changing. There's always things that, coaches have been involved in the sport for 12, 13 plus years. Athletes have been involved for 15 plus years. So you're coming in and just being really curious to know what's going on. What are they seeing? How can I add a different layer of performance that they may have been blind to because of our biases and unconscious biases when we're involved in the sport for so long, as I would have done as in para table tennis for so long, and people coming in and challenging me in the way that I look at the world. So yeah, I've had to. I've watched a lot of matches on YouTube from previous Paralympic Games. I went to my first competition in Rome. And I said to myself when I went to the competition in Rome, I need to obviously lead the team and get the best out of the team, but I'm going really curious. I'm going to go without thinking that what the rules are. I'm just going to go and see what happens and ask questions and try and observe for myself, and came back from there with a lot of learnings that I took into the World Championships. And there's still things today, 6-7 months into the role, that are coming quite new to me. But the more you get to know boccia, the more you fall in love with it, and the more it becomes, in the moment, a real pressurized sport, a real sport where you've got to make the right decision at the right time, and one little wrong decision can really put you into a difficulty then to come back into the game. But it's very similar to curling, actually. And curling is a sport that we have put ourselves as quite comparable to, in terms of the tactical decision making, in terms of looking at the data to see what could happen in the next shot based on the data that we have in front of us, and that helps inform coaches and athletes' decision when they're on the ground. So we use our analysts for that. We've got a project in the background that we're working on with that. So coming back to your question, yes, I've had to ask questions to the athletes, the coaches, watch myself, and get stuck into it. But I'm definitely a performance director that wants to understand all of that, because that's performance on the ground. I'm not someone that's going to leave all that, if you like, to the coaches and the athletes. I will, in terms of them taking ownership and autonomy, but I really want to know what they're going through, want to know what they're feeling, what they're seeing, what they're hearing, understand the technicalities of the sport, because then you can get involved in conversations that are really important to the athletes, and that's the most important thing.
And you had some terrific success with British para table tennis. Was it just time for you to move on? Were you seeking a new challenge? What was the thinking behind the move? Obviously a step up, I guess, as well, in terms of becoming a performance director as well.
I mean, it's always challenging, isn't it, when you leave your sport that you've grown up with? I was with table tennis from 7 years of age, when I first picked up a bat and represented the sport. A junior international career, into coaching, Olympic side, Paralympic side, worked my way up into head coach, and then head coach for the 13-14 years when we were centralised in Sheffield, and went on a real journey with para table tennis, from being the nobodies, if you like, in the international circuit, to then being one of the best in the world. And they've carried on expanding, getting better and developing since my departure, which is great. And they're always going to be, because they've got a really good system and program now in place. But the decision to leave para table tennis was for a new challenge. I'd always said that one day, I wasn't going to be in table tennis for the whole of my career, or para table tennis for the whole of my career. And I think the athletes knew that the staff knew that. And it was just a matter of, it felt like the right time. I'd done 4 Paralympic Games with para table tennis. We had been on that journey, as I said before, to go from a real developing nation to then one of the best nations, with world champions, Paralympic champions, world number ones. And I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could take some of those learnings, experiences, insights into another sport, and really help that sport then really reach and maximize on their potential. Athletes, staff, the whole program, and so it was the right time for me to do that. And I've always wanted to lead a program. If I go back to day one coming into sport, so I feel really lucky and fortunate enough to be able to do that. But as always, it's very difficult to leave the sport that you sort of love and grown up with. But it just felt the right time after Tokyo, and also the right time for para table tennis to go to look at things differently. I'd been involved in the sport as a head coach for a long time, and I thought it was a great opportunity for someone to come in with different ideas as a head coach, to take on the reins and take the sport forward even more.
You're listening to Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy, and we're talking to Greg Baker, Performance Director at Boccia UK. What's the main difference then, Greg, that you're finding from being head coach of something to being a PD?
Yes, I mean, ultimately, it's about people, and I always have to come back to that is the same. You are trying to get the best out of people, whether that is coaches, sports scientists, operation pathway staff, and the athletes. You're trying to get the best out of them. And I think first and foremost, that is the same. And for me, that's the most important part of the role is people getting the best out of them, creating relationships, showing compassion, empathy, but being able to challenge as well at the right times is very similar to the head coach role. It is about people, and it's that people leadership. The differences are all the other things that come with the performance director role around being the lead person for culture, of leading culture and showing that exemplary leadership from all aspects of the program. The finances that are involved, you are the lead person responsible for the budget. As much as you have support and help with that from non-execs and also operation managers, etc., you are totally in charge of the budget responsibility. And then in a sport like boccia, we don't have a chief exec, so I become the lead responsible for governance, for anti-doping, for safeguarding. So all these sort of non-performance aspects of the role as part of our strategic or strategy becomes my sort of responsibility. And so that is a big shift, going from head coach, where you're involved day to day on the ground with coaches, practitioners, getting the best out of the athletes. Whereas now you have that's still part of the role I see as a performance director, but then you've got all the other bigger aspects as well in terms of leading the program strategically. So they're the big shifts. I felt ready to go into that, however, because in my head coach days, the role became less every year technical and more around senior leadership team, more around what are we doing in terms of the budget, where are we going in terms of the sport, of the strategy. So it felt the right time then to go into performance director, given where I wanted to go eventually in my career. But there are always different aspects of the role. And I think one of the challenges in the PD role is that you can get, and we've shared this on the Performance Directors Forum, and it's something that UK Sport are looking at, is you can get dragged into is probably the wrong word, but you moved into lots of different areas, and everyone wants a piece of the PD because they have got insight knowledge, and they can be taken into all aspects of a national governing body. And I suppose the big learning for PDs is, where are we going to make the biggest difference? What is the few things that we need to really focus on, as opposed to spinning so many plates that we're not making as much impact as we want to. And that's probably the challenges going forwards.
So would it be fair to say, Greg, in your opinion, that a performance director, say at cycling or athletics, is a different role to performance director at boccia or table tennis?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I mean, I can't say clearly without being involved in those sports fully, but my only from being involved in conversations with those PDs and just seeing what I see is that there's more money involved, there's a bigger funding, there's more responsibility in terms of staff turnover. There's more athletes on the program. So for example, as a PD in cycling or athletics, you may not get involved in the day-to-day activity in terms of coaches, athletes, as much as you would want to, because of everything else that comes with it, and all of the operational side, the business operational side, the leadership side, the stakeholders, the board, all of those areas. That is still the same in boccia, but probably to a less scope because of the funding that's involved compared to those other sports. So that's where the biggest difference is. I think the bigger the sport, the more that you can get brought into different committees, different boards, working on completely different projects, and some of them performance related and some of them not. And I think as a performance director in some of the bigger funded sports, you'll be looking at the whole of the national governing body, as opposed to the world class program, if you like. Whereas in boccia, we are a standalone world class program. We have a vision of where we want to go as a sport, but ultimately responsible for the results of the athletes on the program, and that's ultimately my role. And obviously, we don't get funded as high as athletics and cycling, etc. But I suppose, and this is rightly so, whether you are boccia, para table tennis, swimming, athletics, we all get looked at in the same way in terms of the governance code, and we have to comply to that governance code, which is the absolutely right thing to do. It brings a lot of work for the small sports, hence you do still get dragged into those different areas, but again, for all the right reasons.
Having a look at your LinkedIn profile, Greg, but business coach at Manchester Metropolitan University, high performance mentor and coach, elite coach in the EPL and ECB. When did the interest in leadership and becoming a leader start for you?
Very early on. And I suppose it was because I was, if you like, fast-tracked into becoming a leader at a very, very, and I say very young age. I had leadership responsibility at the age of 23. So that was when I took the head coach role at table tennis, para table tennis. Wasn't a head coach at the time. Looking back at it now, I was in terms of job title, but in terms of what I was actually doing day to day, I wasn't. I was a coach with a head coach responsibility. And so I wanted to learn, I wanted to understand more. I was always fascinated about leadership. And leaders getting the best out of people, whether that's from coaching leadership, performance director leadership, CEO leadership. And so I would say it was, I was fascinated with that at university. And I went to university, studied coaching, sports development, leadership, came as part of that, leadership and management. So very early on in my career. And I've always wanted to, and I don't know really where this has come from, but I've always wanted to learn, develop, grow, and not get stuck to think that my ideas are the only ideas that are right, or to get stuck in my own biases, as I brought up earlier, or being involved in a sport for a considerable amount of time, just becoming part of the wallpaper and then not challenge my own thinking or challenge the way that we do things. And so wanting to get involved in coach development programs for UK sport to challenge my knowledge, my expertise, to develop myself, and then to help other people. So just before the pandemic, and I'd been on leadership development programs with UK Sport, with Astridge Business School as well. That really helped me. I'd had some executive coaching from that, and all of those programs would really help, really challenge me and challenge my assumptions and beliefs, and then try and take some of that learnings into what I did day to day. And so the next step for me it was part of my leadership philosophy, was to do an executive coaching program, and I did it with Barefoot Coaching, which UK Sport supported me on, and it was to really challenge my leadership to go more from advising, consulting, telling into asking, which as a leader I think is a big key part of being a leader, is asking more questions and not thinking that we know all the answers. There are times that we could be direct, and this is the strategy we need to follow, but there's times we need to get that insight from a lot of people around us. There's a lot of good people around us, and we need to make sure they have the autonomy, but they're also leading and making decisions themselves. And I think you can do that through asking some real curious, deep questions, really understand the people around you. And that's why I did a coaching program. And you think when you go onto these coaching programs, business coaching programs, that you lead like that, but you soon realize that you don't. You might not let people have the time and the silence to think. You might be butting in and trying to give them the answers, or to give them more advice. And actually, by saying less, you're doing more for that person, because you're giving them thinking time and reflection time. So it challenged the way I led. It challenged me on where I wanted to go with my leadership. And, I'd like to think I'm using some of those skills now whether I'm leading in my PD role, whether I'm mentoring, whether I'm doing a bit of business coaching, that it really helps me as a leader, ultimately as a performance director, when I go into performance reviews of athletes, when I go into appraisals with staff, when I go into board meetings, that we ask good questions and we understand what really is someone saying, what are they not saying, and how do I explore that? And I think it just helps better discussions that ultimately helps the sport make better decisions for the future.
Can anyone be a leader? Can you learn it?
Yeah, in my opinion, yes, I think absolutely. There are certain traits that make good leaders. And if you ask me that question around, are leaders born or nurtured, I'd say definitely nurtured. Because if we look at, if I'd have not nurtured my ability, my philosophy, the way I wanted to do things, and again, this is just my opinion, but if I'd have just stood still from the age of 23 and not learned, developed, and grown, I don't think I'd be a very good leader now. Well, I know I wouldn't. I'd be telling everyone what to do. I'd be very direct in my approach. And of course, leadership still needs a bit of that. But I think one big part of leadership is the ability to adapt depending on context, and the ability, depending on who you're working with, and understanding different behaviors and mindsets and personalities. And, how do you get the best out of 50 different people with all different values and all different philosophies? And I think that's good leadership, to being able to do that. But if I'd have just stood still from the age of 23, I think I'd be very difficult in the role that I'm in now, or to have had some of the successes that I've had in the roles before. So absolutely, I think it can be learnt, along with other traits of leadership, transformational leadership, values driven, resilience. These are all things that can be learnt that then can be applied into leadership.
A couple more questions for me. You mentioned the word success. What has been your biggest success?
I think it would have to come down to world champions and Paralympic champions, helping them grow and develop, into, being the top of the tree is very up there and it's close. And, what that's done to those individuals' lives, and, they are, you put themselves on the map within this country, not just within the sport, and it will set them up for a really good career outside the sport that I'm really proud of, and a big achievement to help those individuals. But probably what I don't think about enough, actually, which I think is the breadth and depth that at para table tennis we did in Tokyo, given COVID challenges, preparation challenges. It felt like a real unique Paralympic Games because of that. And although before Tokyo we had won gold medals in Rio, and we'd won a good amount of medals in London, and probably exceeded expectations in London, actually, but then backed it up in Rio with a couple of gold medals and a bronze medal beating China in the final, and really great success. What we did in Tokyo was took 13 athletes, and 12 athletes medaled, whether that be in the individual event or the team event. And it showed that breadth and depth that I talked about before, that everybody that we took realistically had a chance to do really well and to perform to the levels that they want to perform in, which takes a long time in a sport of table tennis, like I said, skill acquisition, technical skill development. And so that really looks at that start. When I started as head coach in just after Beijing 2008, no medals in Beijing. We for whatever reason just weren't there from a performance point of view. We were in Athens and Sydney, but we had this big change that we needed to go through culturally, performance, centralize, invest in the right areas, all of that we went through after Beijing. And it took from Beijing 2008 to 2021 for us to really, I see that vision play out that I as a head coach and we as a program wanted to see. That we can have breadth and depth across the program, and we're not relying, if you like, on one or two athletes to come to the forefront. We know that if we've got, everyone can do it, and we just need to maximize and make sure that they are delivering on their potential, that we know they can do. And that probably is the reasons why after that I was looking for that new challenge, because there was always that and of course you could say I'll go and do that again 4 years time, and we'll do it again, and we'll just keep growing and developing. Of course could have chose that option and would have been very committed to that. But once we'd actually hit that vision that when we talked about as a program in 2008, that was the vision, some people looked at us gone daft, because it's like, we can't even take one medal. How are we going to take, be one of the best in the world? And when you play out that vision, the journey that you've been on. I think it's time then to move on and challenge yourself again in another sport. So that probably topped it off for me. And it was a good time for me then to look in different roles after that played out in Tokyo.
You may have already answered it, but is that then your Paralympic highlight? Or is it the Will Bailey standing on the table celebrating?
So many highlights. It's unbelievable. Which is good, right? You got so many highlights to choose from. Will Bailey's one was really special because first gold medal that we had won as a program for a long time. And again, knowing Will and knowing everything he's been through, he had cancer as a child, he had challenges in classification when he came into table tennis. That was special because he has worked his socks off to get to that point. But as well as that, and we spoke about this to the athletes and stuff, and programs always talk about this. Well, we did anyway at Paralympics. What's been our favourite moment? What's our biggest highlight? And I think it's great. You need to talk about that. You need to celebrate these things. These are the reasons why we do it, is to celebrate these moments. One of the biggest ones in terms of moments that I was there as well, coaching, and in that moment was probably beating China and for the bronze medal match in Rio. So, we'd had 2 gold medals. Rob Davies won a gold medal. I was part of that fantastic, incredible moment. Will Bailey, gold medal, incredible moment. There's something in the sport of table tennis. Beating China goes a long way, being they are the super powers and superhumans, if you like, of table tennis. And we had competed against China in 2008 and got absolutely beaten easily, nowhere near them. And so for then 8 years of that project and that vision we're talking about, to then turn up, albeit a bronze medal match, which still means everything to the athletes when they get to that point. We beat China was a special moment because the odds were against us. We were the underdogs, and to win that was and then top off and cap off, if you like, a real successful Paralympic Games was one of the most special moments.
So just finally then, here we are. I said right at the start, the Paralympic Games, Greg, are next year. They're less than 18 months away. I imagine you've got some kind of color-coded spreadsheet on your laptop. What is the one thing on the to-do list between now and when you get to Paris that you need to do at Boccia UK to bring that medal success that we spoke about right at the start?
Yeah, I think it's, and thanks for reminding me that they're so close again, because you have to pinch yourself sometimes when this is a real short cycle to what we've known before. The one thing we need to do is absolutely maximise on what we've just done from the World Championships. And actually, even if we had not got those results in the World Championships, it was about how do we maximise on our potential that we definitely have within the team in 18 months' time come Paris. So we've just done our annual reviews and we've done all of the conversations, performance check-ins with the athletes. And we're looking at individually, how do we get the best out of you? How do we make sure that your goal that you want to achieve by Paris, we can get as close to it as possible? How do we maximize on that? And through really good strategic planning as a program where we're coming together, we bring in athletes' insight, athletes' input, and athlete voice as well into those conversations. And therefore we maximize on it. Now, that sounds very simple, but to do that is a hard and challenging process. But we just need to come together as a team. One of the big things that we've said as a team is to be really, really values driven. So a real important part of my leadership is, can we have really good collaboration? Can we be totally honest and open with each other? And can we bring vulnerability into the way that we do things, both with athletes and staff? And I think if we do that and take care of that, and that impacts on the culture, then if we've got good planning alongside that in terms of our performance, I think we've got the best chance then to deliver on our performances in Paris. I believe that we only do the planning bit and we only do the strategic bit in terms of where we're going, who do we need to be careful of, and we don't do the culture bit in terms of the values driven and talking about who we are and our identity and why we do the things that we do and sharing personal stories with each other. I don't think we'll be as strong as team as we can be. So that for me is you've got, if you like, that's probably answered it in two sides. You've got the strategic performance bit. Where are we going? What do we need to do? Where are the competitions? What are our competitors doing? How do we stay ahead of our competitors in terms of our camp planning, our training day to day, the way that we are as a SLT? And then we've got the values culture bit. I think if we do those side by side, then I think we're giving ourselves the best chance come Paris.
Well, we are really looking forward to following your journey between now and then, even if it isn't that far away. Greg Baker, Performance Director at Boccia UK, thank you for speaking to Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy.
No, thank you very much. Really enjoyed that and absolutely appreciate getting the invitation to come and talk about my career and Boccia. So thanks very much.